Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Africa Week 2020. With me here in the studio, we have the President of the Socialists and Democrats Group at the European Parliament. We also have Mr. Udo, the coordinator of this fourth edition. We have Alan here in the studio with us, also joining us as a discussant for today. Good morning once again. And for our edition today is in partnership with Unesco, the Frederick Ebert Foundation and Young European Socialists. And the title of the edition is For a Strengthened Partnership Between Africa and the EU. Before we continue, I would like to give the floor to the President of the Socialists and Democrats to open the session for us. Good morning, Madam.
Good morning, dear friends. I am very happy to be here with you today. I wish that we could meet in person, but the COVID-19 pandemic imposed some restrictions that we have to respect. However, we really wanted to maintain this Africa Week, which has become a tradition in our group. This is the fourth year we organize it. It is an important event for the Socialists and Democrats, and I'm very proud that I can continue it now as a president of the group. This is a very special space to share, to learn from each other, and to work together for our global challenges. I hope that we can continue the conversation in this virtual setting, and also that our discussions will be very fruitful. The European Union had already launched a new strategy for Africa in early March, right before the pandemic broke out. It invited us both in Europe and in Africa to establish a new partnership. I think that the COVID-19 only make it more urgent to go ahead and build that partnership. That is what we want to do these days. We all face the challenges of poverty, inequalities between the rich and the poor, the global warming and water scarcity. In my own country, this is becoming a problem. We also have to strengthen democracy and social inclusion and give more opportunities to our youth with better access to education. We are also seeing how important it is to have access to health service and how important it is to have all these opportunities. This is an important moment to hear between us, to exchange our different point of view, and I'm very happy to have a special panel with the women issues because we cannot do our work without the half of the population. I welcome all your contribution, and I hope that during these days we can have a good and successful work in order to guarantee this new partnership and a good cooperation between us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Perez. I would like to, let me ask Mr. Bullman to give a short introduction of the session this morning.
Thank you so much. Of course, we cannot ignore it. We are in the midst of a global health crisis that already cost 1 million human beings' lives. We know exactly that the impact of COVID-19 will be a deepening of our social and economic crisis. Worldwide, we have already more than 700 million people in extreme poverty. We have 1.3 billion without access to basic needs, and that is a challenge for us. So we have to react to that. COVID will tremendously increase existing inequalities within our societies, between our countries, and will bring to the surface all our weaknesses. But our hope is, the hope of Irache, the hope of me, that it will not only bring to the surface our weaknesses, but also our strength, our readiness for collective action, because this is the situation. We have to take collective action. Whatever we do now, we are at the crossroads, and what we do not do, what we miss to do, will come back on us and will be either a chance or an obstacle for our collective future. Plus, We know that we are living in a totally interconnected world. What happens today in Iceland will directly impact on Rwanda tomorrow and vice versa. So it will be also the other way around. So that means let us search for ways in which we can leave these kind of vicious circles, because we cannot allow ourselves to just tumble from one crisis into another. We need a progressive way forward. And what is this progressive way about? Of course, what we need is decent jobs. We need safety nets for everybody, excellent education, especially basic education. And even more, we need to strengthen our societies and boost new energy into the batteries of those actors who are struggling for real change. These are our comrades, these are our partners we are looking for to collaborate in the closer future. What we have to do, and Irache mentioned that, global warming, preserve our nature, our water, our soil, the air that we breathe, fighting climate change, so that both continents can be an appropriate place for ourselves as well as our kids and the incoming generation. Europe needs Africa, as Africa needs Europe. What we need in Europe, what inspires us, what gives us faith for the future, is the energy, is the hopes, is the dreams of this young continent in our neighborhood. This is what we dearly need, and we are ready to pave the way for a better collaboration, for a truthful collaboration and equal footing, using all the tools of solidarity at our command. That means we are going this exciting and inspiring endeavor together. We join our forces and we try to build inclusive societies, sustainable societies, just and fair to everybody, where everybody can find her and his place. Now is the time to doing that. Now there is a call on us to become active and to lead the discourse about the forthcoming policies of African Union, African countries, African neighbors, African activists, and us, the socialists and democrats. We are ready. We stand ready not only to contribute and commit our solidarity, but to take the lead in this discourse and to help Europe also to realize the signs on the wall and to become active finally. I'm very grateful together with Irache to open this Africa Week session 2020 together with enormous partners, enormous in numbers, enormous in their meaningful activities. That is our pride, that we have so many friends contributing to these activities during the next days. We will bring together activists, NGO representatives, trade unionists, journalists, business people, academics, politicians, and especially young people to communicate and to come together and find common ground in hopefully fruitful exchanges. That is what the Africa Week is all about. And then I would be more than happy to hand over to Puala again and to allow her to lead us through this morning session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowman. And good morning once again and welcome to this session. Our special session is on the youth and in EU and Africa. The special edition is on digital transition, on education, democracy, and inequality in the context of COVID-19. As we all know, the pandemic has really affected our countries and all over the world. So solutions, as Mr. Bowman pointed out, lie in collaboration and partnership with each other. Particularly for Africa, Africa is a very young population. So this session is very important to discuss how do we deal with the future population of Africa. And they are here as well as live audience to discuss and contribute and see the way forward. So good morning, everybody. And I would like to introduce Good morning, and our next presenter to open our special session for the youth is the European Commissioner for International Partnerships, Ms. Jutta Urpilainen. As European Commissioner for International Partnerships, Ms. Urpilainen oversees the European Commission's work on international cooperation and sustainable development. Before joining the Commission, Ms. Urpilainen served as a member of the Finnish Parliament from 2003 to 2019. In 2008, she became the first woman leader of the Social Democratic Party of Finland. From 2011 to 2014, she served as Finland's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. During that time, she became closely involved in development issues, joining the Development Committee of the World Bank Group and IMF, and chairing the Finnish National Commission on Sustainable Development. She served as the Foreign Minister's Special Representative on Mediation from 2017 and 2019, and chaired the Finnish National Commission for Unesco in 2015 to 2018. Welcome, Ms. Urpilainen.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. And I'm very pleased to have the honor to speak in this very famous and important S&D Africa Week. I also want to thank the group for maintaining this tradition despite the very difficult circumstances. And I especially value that I can speak in the youth event. Why? Because as we tackle the pandemic, we also have to look beyond it. We have to build back better so that you, the youth, have the opportunities to change your lives. Youth and the sustainable future are in the core of the evolving EU-Africa partnership. If you only look at the population in Africa, 60% of the population are under 30 years old. There are countries, like in the Sahel region, where half of the population is under 16 years old. So it's a very, very young continent. And this is the reason why I personally decided to put young people into the driving seat of the consultation process I launched before the summer relating to Africa strategy. Now, in order to build back better, we must, of course, ask ourselves that what are the key building blocks of sustainable future? And I would say that this pandemic, this COVID-19, has, like an X-ray, revealed existing inequalities, showing how they expose societies to external shocks. So, from my perspective, the fighting inequalities is clearly a priority. That's the main priority for me as a politician, but I think that that's the main priority also for our political family. And how do we do that? How do we fight inequalities? I see, following this event's headline, that education, that's number one, but also digital transition and democracy are central elements to reduce inequalities. And these are also the priorities we have identified for our partnership with Africa. So I want to start with education, because unfortunately the vulnerability of education systems has exposed by the COVID-19 crisis. If we only look at the figures, last spring 1.2 billion pupils were out of school. Can you imagine? 1.2 billion people and young people were out of school. And as a former teacher, I believe that now there is an urgency to boost our efforts on education. So there is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reopen schools better than they were before the crisis. Investing in education, I think it's a powerful tool to reduce inequalities and reach all SDGs. So we must not forget the schools often offer more than just education with other social services like school meal. Then secondly, it is time to unleash the potential of digitalization for education. We must aim to develop digital skills for all, because digitalization is one of the key tools for implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, but also the Africa Agenda 2063. And I'm always so impressed in a way when I'm traveling in Africa that how much young people actually are using technology already in Africa. But of course there are still many opportunities to invest digitalization. And that's why our proposal for a new strategy with Africa aims to boost Africa's digital transformation, putting the people first. And of course, finally, digitalization means also access to information and enables all voices to be heard in a democratic process. The very foundation of every sustainable society must be democracy, and I think this is something what we are discussing quite a lot at the moment also in Europe, that we want to build more peaceful and inclusive future with the knights of democracy, young women and men as our partners. So EU and its member states, together with our financial institutions, we have put together 36 billion euros Team Europe global response in order to help our partner countries to fight COVID-19. And we will continue this work together with our African partners to create a partnership that puts sustainability, future and youth at its heart and leaves no one behind. I think that could be in a way also the message from this week, that we want to leave no one behind. Everybody has a place in our society, everybody is able to be heard and everybody is visible. And I think, that's in a way the message I want to pass today. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Before we continue with our panelists of today, I would like to take 2 questions, please, for Commissioner. From our live audience, we would like to have 2 questions, please. Maybe Alan, do you have a question for Commissioner?
Yeah, for me, I would like to know more about the agenda, the digital transformation agenda that you just mentioned with the partnership with Africa and the African Union, and then also like you mentioned a budget of 36 billion to support Africa. I would like just to know a little bit more about it and then how it will unfold in the future.
Yes, if I start with the latter question. I would say that immediately when we realized that this will be a global pandemic, we started to work together with our member states, but also with the financial institutions in Europe in order to help our partner countries to fight COVID-19. And I have to say that I'm very proud. I'm very proud European in order to tell that we were able to build up 36 billion euros package through which we try to help our partner countries, not only in Africa, but worldwide, to fight COVID-19. And we are providing financial support in 3 different areas. So that the first one is humanitarian assistance. The second one is that we try to strengthen the healthcare systems and food security systems in our partner countries, also in Africa. And then the third one, which is, I think, the most difficult one, is that we try to help our partner countries to mitigate the socio-economic consequences of the COVID-19 crisis in our partner countries. Because, of course, we know that in many African countries, unfortunately, there is no safety net. So there is no social benefits in a way that if you lose your job, if there is a lockdown in your society, so there is a real risk that you are suffering. So you are suffering at home without food, without any social benefit or any financial support. And so I would say that African young people and African citizens are facing the COVID-19 is in totally different situation that we are facing that in Europe, even though we have, of course, difficulties in many our member states. So that's why we have been supporting Africa, but also our other sister and brother continents. Then relating to digitalization, I would say that we have, in a way, in this new Africa strategy, we have defined that there are some megatrends in the world that all the countries are facing to. And one of them is, of course, climate change, but the other one is digitalization. And what we want to do is that we want to, of course, invest infrastructure in Africa, but also I would say that one new aspect which has also raised during this COVID-19 crisis is how to use digitalization in education. Because I think it also gives us a huge opportunity, not only in Europe, but also in Africa, to really, provide access to education to those young people who are maybe living in the countryside. So if we are able to use technology and also digitalization in teaching, for instance, and in education. So those climate change, but also digitalization and then human development will be our main priorities in the next programming when we start to allocate the funding in, next year to different projects. Sorry, my long answer, but I was so excited about the questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. I don't know if we have another respondent joining us. In the meantime, I would like to thank Ms. Perez, and I would like to be excused because thank you so much for the contribution, and we look forward to working with you and to the next session. Thank you so much. Commissioner, just a brief question. I'm wondering what will be different in the collaboration between Europe and Africa when we're talking about the huge damage. As we know, there's approximately Africa total loss with the pandemic is estimated at 1 trillion approximately. I don't know what's going to change in this partnership, the way Europe and Africa relate with each other. Because there's been a lot of work before, but what will be different this time?
Well, I would say that this new Africa strategy we adopted just before the COVID-19 hit in the beginning of March. The main narrative of it was that we want to have an equal partnership with Africa, that we don't want to have this kind of a donor-recipient relationship, but we want to have really this kind of a two-way partnership which is valuable for both of us. And then we were defining those 5 different policy areas where we want to strengthen our partnership with Africa. But I have to admit that even though I think that the strategy is still valid, of course COVID-19 has changed a lot. And at my in a way, the main goal is really at the moment to work for that idea that we still, even though many of the countries of the world they have difficulties in their public finances, I would say that it's important that we are still committed to Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. That will be the main framework for our developing cooperation. And relating to that, we are at the moment very much working on the financing for development. And we know that, for instance, the question of debt is quite crucial for many African countries. Yes. Because, their debt level is increasing, and that means that, they don't really have a fiscal space to allocate public financing for education or for healthcare. And that's why the Commission and the President of the Commission has proposed that we should have this kind of a global recovery initiative where we combine debt relief and debt restructuring investments to the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. And I really hope that the European Union and all our member states, but also the European Parliament, and I really hope that also the S&D Group could be in a strong position in order to lead this process, that we are able to convince the international community that we need this kind of approach in order to help our partner countries and also achieve those goals, which are still, I would say, our main priority.
Thank you very much. If we don't have any more questions, do we have any more questions? If we have no more questions, I would like to proceed with presenting. Thank you very much, Commissioner. It was very good to have you. I would like to present our panelists who are joining us live, and the usual way in the pandemic, they're unable to be with us in the studio. So I'll start with Mr. Arrow, Mr. Matt Arrow, who is the co-founder, Dream Apply chairman of the board, Nordic EdTech Forum N8, co-founder, European EdTech Alliance. Good morning, Mr. Arrow. Good morning.
Sorry, good
Yes.
morning. You're cut off for the past 30 seconds or so I couldn't hear what you're saying.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for joining us all the way from Estonia. Good morning. So Mr. Arrow, since 2004, has established several organizations and companies in the areas of education development. The latest solution, dreamapply.com, is a student application management platform which Mr. Arrow co-founded in 2011. Today, Dream Apply is used by 250 universities from 35 countries, serving millions of users a year. The most recent NGO, Nordic EdTech Forum N8, brings together 140 founders of education innovation initiatives from 8 Northern European countries with the aim of sharing experience and fostering cooperation. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Arrow. Our next panelist is Mr. Samson Itodo from Nigeria. Also joining us live from Nigeria. While we're waiting for Mr. Itodo, Mr. Arrow, would you please go ahead and give us your presentation, please? We cannot hear you, the sound. Thank you.
All right. So just the reason why I'm here is to talk about one potential way to improve the quality and accessibility for education globally. And but just to give a little bit of background, I'm coming from the future. And in this future, 99% of government services are online. Doing taxes takes about 3 minutes, and establishing a company takes about 20 minutes. And of course, voting for the parliament is done online as well. And the internet is considered a human right. And we're also not keeping it all to ourselves. This is available for everybody globally. So you can become an e-resident and take advantage of these opportunities. Do you know which country I'm talking about?
Yes?
It's Estonia.
Go ahead.
I have a very simple dream. Why I'm waking up every morning is to enable access to high quality education to everybody globally. And of course, this means also looking at all regions of the world. To do this, I've already set up 3 NGOs and 4 companies in education development during the past 16 years. Now let's imagine a future of education where instead of having one solution that fits all, we'd have a pile of Lego blocks on the table that we could combine together in the way that is the most beneficial for this concrete learner. And actually the learner could have a say in which kind of learning they should be doing and which kind of methodologies they should be using. So imagine this kind of pile of Lego blocks here. And now I'll switch to a little bit theoretical background. So how the governments are so far building software is very much resembling the monolithic approach of software development, which essentially means that when software is built, it's a large system that is tightly knit together, and it's very hard to develop it or improve it. And usually, these kind of systems are very hard to do. And now, let's try to imagine a different possibility. Possibility of microservices approach, where we would have a specialist solution for many different things to learn. And I will bring a few examples of why this difference is so important. So let's imagine that we want to have one system that covers all kind of learning what we want to do through our lifetime. So
Our topic is digitization.
when we look at this kind of picture, one person, when they're born until they die, might want to learn about a few million learning bytes. So we want to know about a few million different things nowadays. And if you try to imagine one large system that covers all of it, it's becoming almost impossible. We're getting stuck very quickly on the technological challenges there. But even if you try to imagine this, so let's imagine that we have a system that covers a million different learning outcomes. Then if we even try to get the best perfect team from all across the world to develop this, we could probably cover 100,000 of these topics with great expertise, and the rest of the 900,000 would be built in average or below average quality because of that. So now if we switch to microservices side, then we can very easily imagine the top experts from the world coming together to build one concrete learning solution. And I will bring just one example. So let's imagine that we have hyperactive children and we want to teach them multiplication table. And it's very easy to imagine this kind of a tool to be built. And we can probably have even several teams across the world working on building the best solution in their opinion and pushing it out to the rest of the world from their side. And these kind of solutions, guess what, could be developed everywhere in the world. So this includes Africa as well. And actually, we have seen a really nice increase in African innovation of education in the recent years. And what needs to happen for these microservices to nicely work together is that there needs to be an infrastructure that enables them to be connected. So, and how can we then inspire people or get them on board with solving the educational challenges that they have at hand or that they see around them? I've been traveling across the globe the past few years, speaking about innovation of education at all sorts of different conferences. And what I've seen is that always the people that are passionate about improving the quality of education, they know very well what is holding them back. For example, I was in Latin America last year, and I had a few conferences where I was speaking there. And then I was asking from the local education innovators, like, what's the main reason? What's holding you back? And they brought out straight away that, hey, but starting a limited company in here is very hard. It takes a few years to set up a limited company. And of course, if you understand that this is a problem, this is the first kind of stepping stone, and it's impossible to achieve this for a normal person who has ideas of improving the education for everybody, then you can find a solution for this. And especially if we collaborate globally, it is possible to find the solutions, because Estonia has already solved this problem, for example, and now we can help people in Latin America to use the same model that is used in Estonia. Also, we see that in various countries there are already measures in place that support people that want to improve education. And these supportive measures can be empowered, and also they can be scaled internationally, and this needs attention as well. To move this all into a very practical space, together with United Nations Technology Innovations Labs, and Nordic EdTech Forum, which is the Nordic Association of Innovators in Education, we've put together last spring a vision for the global EdTech or education innovation ecosystem development. And I will just bring a few examples from here. One is EdTech Marketplace, for example. The marketplace enables people that have great ideas of how to improve education to build their solutions and share this across the globe. And yes, was there a question?
You have a few seconds to wind up the presentation, please.
Yep, I am actually quite done already, but just to summarize this, the problem that this would solve, for example, is that the teacher could find very easily the concrete tools that they need for their education. And now, if you would like to learn more about this, if this is interesting for you, don't hesitate to add me in LinkedIn, for example. And my name is Mart Aro, and more than happy to share with you the work that we have been doing. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. And as we all know, education is very key for, is a key component for social development in most of the countries. And we are very happy to have you on this program, and we hope that our viewers watching can learn something about it and connect with your team. Thank you very much. Before I leave you for the questions, I would like to bring in the next panelists. Next panelist, Mr. Samson, joining us all the way from Nigeria. Good morning. Samson, can you hear us? Good morning. Mr. Hodol is Executive Director of YAGA Africa, a community of change makers focused on building sustainable democracies in Africa. Samson is a community organizer and development practitioner with 13 years of experience in elections, parliamentary strengthening, constitution building, youth development, and communities, and community organization. He's the executive director of YAGA Africa and convener of the Not Too Young to Run movement that led to the reduction of age limits for running for public office in Nigeria. Good morning once again, Mr. Odo. We are talking about digitization, and we're having a hitch with the technical here, so we see how we can connect. I will introduce our next panelist while we're waiting to connect with Mr. Odo. Our next panelist is Mr. Guy Berger. Joining us live online, Mr. Guy Berger is, good morning. Is Mr. Berger online? Can we have him online, please? Mr. Itodo, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
While we're waiting for our next panelist, would you please go ahead with your presentation? Thank you very much. Good morning. And we're so happy to have you in this discussion. Good morning.
Well, thank you very much. As director of Unesco, overseeing our work on freedom of expression.
Sorry, good morning.
My presentation will focus on what we call the COVID-19 disinfo. Everybody here knows, of course, that disinformation worsens the pandemic and its impact everywhere. The economic consequences in Europe have a huge impact, even on those countries in Africa that have been more able to control the pandemic. Now, people will also know of the Sustainable Development Goal 1610, which says public access to information and fundamental freedom. Public access to information and fundamental freedom. SDG 1610. I need to repeat, this is public access to information as part of development. It's not public access to disinformation. but we are getting both. In fact, we are getting so much disinformation, it's difficult to distinguish what is the disinformation and what is the information. If we want to understand also what happens, what is the result of disinformation, consider disinformation on the one hand, information on the other. If information is empowering, then disinformation is disempowering. Further, I think we can recognize that disinformation is adversarial against information. It needs to attack information. It has an inbuilt imperative to try and discredit the truth tellers, like the scientists, medical professionals, and journalists. Now, at UNESCO, we've been researching the different responses to this disinformation. We have published a very interesting study called Balancing Act, which you can find on our UNESCO website. And we looked at 11 different kinds of responses to disinformation, which are relevant all over the world, in Europe and in Africa. One of these responses is a category of legal and policy responses, which affect the governance of the information ecosystem. And many of these legal responses are criminalizing the acts of producing or sharing information that's deemed false. Now, the big danger is that some of these new laws are so widely formulated that they are putting journalists at risk of being arrested simply for raising criticisms or reflecting policy debates. And some of these new laws have also been justifying internet shutdown and censorship. The result of this is that freedom of expression that could be part of the solution against disinformation, producing information, producing content about where is the disinformation coming from, who's benefiting from it. This freedom of expression, instead of being part of the solution, because of these over-responses, is becoming a casualty. This we find all over the world, in Europe and in Africa as well. A second response that UNESCO is looking at is interventions to strengthen the audience which is targeted by disinformation. Now, we all know, of course, that a lot of disinformation is coming through social media and social messaging. And we also know that in Africa, only 40% of the population have a kind of internet access, depending on many issues. Now, of course, what's needed is to increase this internet access because internet is so important, particularly in these times of the pandemic. But this access has to be accompanied by the other side of the coin, which is the knowledge and skill to use the internet. And all over the world, there is a big gap in the levels of what we like to call media and information literacy. Media and information literacy, which can empower people to distinguish between disinformation and information, for example, online, and what is still in process, content that's not clearly yet true, not clearly false, but to have this clear concept and ability to begin to make sure that they can consume and circulate and share information which is verified. Now, interestingly, I'll just tell you briefly about UNESCO's. We did a survey in many countries in Africa about all these issues. And particularly what we found is that those who are trying to share information on COVID are too much using a top-down approach, which is proving to be ineffective. It's not dealing with disinformation on the virus. It's not inspiring the behavior. The second finding of this research was that there's too much focus on telling people what they need to know and in too much jargon rather than what they want to know. We also found that community radio are the very important platforms, even perhaps more important than social media, for communicating with marginalized communities in local languages. And lastly, we found that the pandemic really has highlighted how important professional journalism to give verified, credible facts and news and informed opinion. Now, the way we've been responding to this survey and the research findings are we've launched a massive open online course in collaboration with the World Health Organization and UNDP on how to build capacity of journalists. Journalists from 21 African countries have begun to learn more about how to tell the story of COVID and its impacts without falling into disinformation. Secondly, we've been developing with the Africa Check Alliance health and misinformation fact check toolkit that will be distributed through social media and through community radios and through other kinds of media. And then we're producing a lot of audio resources, particularly for radio. So in Senegal, for example, we supported 120 radio stations to adapt and broadcast in 8 languages the content covering discrimination and disinformation around the question of COVID. In Ethiopia, we used the Telegram to work with 49 community radio stations in 6 languages, again, on this question of trying to increase the supply of good content. If people are interested in this, you can search for coronavirus facts, one word, and you'll find our webpage and social media. So to wrap up here, I think that what we can learn from this current period of relevance to Europe and Africa and development is that first, this pandemic has really highlighted just how important Sustainable Development Goal 1610 is. That is that there cannot be development if we don't have public access to information and fundamental freedoms. Second, we've learned how important it is to have media and good journalism publishing verified facts and informed opinion, which is an alternative to disinformation and can help also tell the story of this disinformation. And the last point is that we have an opportunity here also to strengthen the role of news media, as providing such an important service to the public in times of crisis. We know audiences have increased over this period, but at the very same time that there's more demand for quality information, we also need urgent support to mitigate the very hard economic impact on the media outlet. Both in Europe and in Africa, we cannot let this virus end up killing journalism as the media houses are cutting back on staff or even closing down due to the COVID-caused economic crisis. UNESCO is working with the World Association of Newspapers, various groups, including the EU and in African countries, on this very important issue. Because if we do not find a mechanism to save the news media, then disinformation will win the day. And that will set us all back in terms of sustainable development and democracy, both in Europe and in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berecher from UNESCO. Please stay online for the respondents, and thank you for having you here. Our next panelists, I would like to introduce our panelists from Nigeria, Mr. Samson Itodo. Good morning, Mr. Samson.
Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. How are you doing? And thank you to have you here with us on the session. Mr. Itodo, like I said, I already introduced you in your absence, and thank you for joining us. You were having problems with connection. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Well, thank you very much, and it's such a delight to speak at this very important event. My task this morning is to mainly look at this discussion from the prisms of democracy and equality. And I'd like to say that I'm very delighted to have been asked to speak on this a very important topic as it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals and how we can convert the opportunity that are very inherent in the COVID-19 pandemic. There are 3 key points I'd like to make. And the first point is the fact that clearly crisis is a driver of change. And across the African continent and across the world, we are beginning to see government and the people, doing business and governance in new ways. So this pandemic has, triggered new ways of leadership, new ways of community organizing, and new ways of governance. And how can we, harness, this potential and this wave to drive, development and economic prosperity within the continent of Africa? First is As we look at, the opportunities that are inherent in COVID-19, one thing technology has done, or one thing COVID-19 has shown, is that digital literacy is the new oil that drives development. And so we've got to invest, in using technology to advance democratic rights and give citizens the opportunity to participate in the process, especially young people, because the trust deficit that we saw our experience within citizens and the government was apparent in this COVID-19. So people didn't trust their government. When government, issued containment measures or protocols on how to curtail, the COVID-19. In fact, in some countries, they didn't believe that COVID-19 is real. But we've seen how technology has helped, in breaching that trust. And so either young people have devised new technological tools for promoting information around COVID-19, or even holding their government to account. And what we see, because that opportunity that the COVID-19 has provided citizens, to ask their government questions about how resources are being expended, for COVID-19, it's very, very important that we leverage on that using technology to sustain, the participation of citizens in the democratic process. This pandemic has also provided, an opportunity to rethink even the concept of elections and how elections are conducted. And so across Africa, the discussion about how do we ensure our electoral processes really have minimal physical contact. And so electronic voting or electronic results transmission have been a key discussion currently in Africa. Although some countries, have conducted elections, but is there an opportunity for increased use of electoral technology to deepen the transparency of the electoral process, but lastly also, encourage, citizens' participation in the electoral process? The third fundamental point I'd like to make with respect to democracy and inequality is the fact that during the COVID-19 pandemic, or in the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen how authoritarians, exploited, the gaps within that were apparent in the COVID-19 to either curtail press freedom or the freedom of association of people. And authoritarian regimes also, clamped down on opposition forces. Now, it is important to underscore that within the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen how, democratic institutions and structures have been undermined and they've been threatened. And if you look at, the values that the EU holds very dear, the values of liberty, the values of freedom, these values, were, threatened and assaulted in the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this really puts three things to the fore. The fact that there is an opportunity to deepen institutions of accountability within our democratic system. And so the parliament, civil society, media, and political parties need a lot of investment that strengthens, their capacities, one, to hold the state to account and limit the excesses of the state. Because as the state clamps down on either citizens, it diminishes, human dignity and undermines democracy. And so if the EU, as we know, values democracy and liberties and freedom, this is an opportunity for strong partnerships with Africa to strengthen Africa's nations to deepen, the quality of democracy. The second point on this is about the role of the citizens. And citizens play a critical role in democracy. And when I mean citizens, I will devolve down to women, youth, and young persons with disability. that we need a new political mobilization strategy that puts these marginalized groups into the center of politics and governance. Because the trust deficit that is apparent within public spaces needs to be addressed. So one opportunity that we have is to bridge, this relationship between state and society, so that governments will be able, to deliver on the promises and on the sustainable development goals. When you talk about poverty, when you talk about quality education, we talk about technology, when you talk about justice, it is important that we've got institutions who are able to perform this function. The last point I'd just like to emphasize is the investment that we need to make in building young people on the continent of Africa. These are the present, these are the future, and we need investment in human capital, as it in education. We need to empower, young people within Africa on education. We also need to provide quality healthcare to this social category. But as we do so, we must also understand that young or the youth is a transient age. And because it's a transient age, they will determine the workforce of the continent of Africa. And that is why we have to create both political and economic opportunities for them. And if we care about the future of Africa, if we care about the future of the world, then this is the moment to entrust young people with more responsibility, invest in building their capacity, and then provide opportunities for them to contribute to either societal or national development. I think I'd stop here.
Thank you very much. And I agree with you that education is really important, especially for the young generation. The other thing is that for our politicians, for our political systems in Africa, I think when we look back on our traditions, we have very good traditional systems, which, if they were applied, would reflect better political systems in our countries. Thank you very much. And please stay online for the questions later on. Thank you so much. Our next panelist, I would like to introduce Ms. Tanya Cox. Tanya is director of Concord, and she's joining us online. She brings, Tanya is also a member of the Confederation of Tanya brings to the position over 22 years of experience, 14 of which are in international cooperation and human rights. She previously worked as the Senior Policy and Advocacy Manager in the EU Office of Plan International, and prior to that was with Save the Children and Human Rights Watch. Tanya has been an active member of Concord since 2009, most particularly leading the work on sustainable development for many years. She will bring on board her experience in management and communication, as well as her considerable expertise in policy and advocacy. Welcome, Tanya, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rose. It's wonderful to be with you all. Pleasure to be here. I'm going to be complementing the other speakers and looking at this issue of digitalization, education, and from an inequalities perspective, which is one of our main themes that we're working on within Concord. So I think we should recognize, first of all, that there are very many examples of innovative uses of digital technology, AI, robotics, 3D printing, and so on in Africa. I could cite robots walking down a Rwandan hospital during the COVID times, delivering blood supplies. I could cite drones delivering medicines to far-flung villages in Sierra Leone. I could cite the pretty huge rise in the use of mobile money in South Africa, Rwanda, Nigeria, in fact, across the continent. And these examples have come to light and have increased, in fact, at least partly because of the COVID-19 crisis. But as M-Pesa saw in Kenya back in 2008, habits born out of a crisis can stick. Africa has around 130 million active users of mobile financial services. It's hard to imagine, by comparison with these examples, that actually only about 20% of the population subscribes to the internet in Africa. And of course, that's an average figure. So in some of the countries, we're talking about 5% of the population, whereas in others, it's of course a lot more. One reason is the exorbitant price of data. Whereas 1 gigabyte of data in India, which admittedly is the cheapest place in the world for data, in India it only costs 26 cents per gigabyte. In Zimbabwe, by comparison, which admittedly is the most expensive, so we're going to the other end of the spectrum, it costs $75. And in general, across Africa, prices are just way higher than elsewhere in the world. And this is clearly prohibitive for many people, such as those who work in the informal economy, and they count in the millions in Africa, marginalized groups, and so on. So the digital divide and digital inequalities, they start here. Income clearly comes into it, but so do a whole range of other factors, like gender, for example. Up to 90% of women and girls in developing countries have no basic internet or computer knowledge. Where you live counts for a lot. The rural-urban split is one of the biggest divides that we see as well, and was particularly prevalent during COVID, when it really mattered, with the rural areas being so massively underserved. Another factor is age, with older people being far less digitally savvy, not to mention disability. So this divide, or these divides, perhaps I should say, isn't helped by the fact that in Africa there are still some educational shortages, which is also a barrier slowing down the growth of digital firms, technological firms and technological solutions. What's more, when one does introduce digital technology and solutions, of course, this then requires reskilling, even for people in formal employment. And companies in rich countries are already investing very heavily in this. So what happens if you're in a much poorer country where this is a challenge? So there are a whole lot of reasons why there are considerable inequalities of opportunity. Now, as we think how we can best support Africa's digital expansion, we need to be careful not to exacerbate these fundamental inequalities through the interlinkages which inevitably exist between the different areas. Let's just take the topic of education, which is one of the things that we're discussing today. Many organisations, including many of Concord's members, want to contribute to people's learning by bringing it to the people when they're available. We've learned through experience that, people may need to leave formal education programs to go and work in the fields at harvest time, just to give you an example, or to look after the family. So, of course, we were hoping to get round this by bringing the learning to them via the internet when they can manage it. At least that's the good intention. But those who can't afford the data can't log on, and so won't be able to learn. And this brings me to a question. We've always said that education should be free, totally free at primary level, as free as possible also in secondary. So what should the role of the state be in this situation to make sure that education remains free, when digital technologies, the hardware, the provision of the data come from the private sector? And we are increasingly turning to digital education, even at primary level, especially at times like COVID outbreaks. As well as inequalities of opportunity, there are also inequalities of outcome or benefits. And here I'd like to go a bit more macro. My first point is that we need to watch out for data capitalism. There are quite a number of multinational companies from developed countries that are gathering and selling data and making huge amounts of money out of it. So we definitely need to be considering what to do about privacy and data protection, especially in countries where regulation is known to be quite weak. The second angle we should consider is that of resource extraction. We're still facing a situation that the profits from digital technology are very unevenly distributed. Wealth is flowing out of the countries providing the minerals that go into our gadgets. It's being made, the wealth is being made by the companies producing those gadgets. So something needs to be done about the pricing of the resources to ensure that fair pricing and a win-win situation exist. So when we think about what should happen going forward, I think many of us could suggest quite a few of the recommendations. We need to invest in the infrastructure, connectivity, the electricity supply. We need to look at the price of data. We need to ensure a reliable regulatory framework. We need to invest in skills, digital education. We know this. But there are two things that I would like to flag to end with. Most particularly, we must take a people-centered approach to make sure that we leave no one behind, and that we take a joined-up approach to make sure that we address these multidimensional and intersectional issues that I've been trying to raise, to make sure we don't increase inequalities, no doubt by accident. And we need to respect Africa's way of going about digitalization. The AU has drawn up a digital strategy for Africa, and its aim is to improve the lives of Africa's citizens. And at the heart of that strategy are a set of principles. And I'd like to cite just one of them. That the digital transformation must be homegrown, led and owned by African institutions. So whatever the EU and its partners do to support digitalization in Africa, it must play by African rules, or we must play by African rules, follow Africans' lead, and we must be sure we don't increase the digital divides in our hurry to make a huge profit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Please stay online for questions to come. Do we have any questions? Let's take some questions from the respondents, please. Anna? Anna, are you ready with your question? And please indicate who you would like to respond to your question when you give us your question, and indicate which of the participants you would like the question referred to. Good morning, Anna. If Anna is not ready, who is ready? Can we have Ahmed? Good morning, Ahmed. Bonjour.
Oui, bonjour. Oui,
Please,
bonjour.
Bonjour. Please go ahead with your question, Ahmed.
Moi, j'aimerais...
Yes, I have a question.
Ouais, oui.
In view of the statistics about the negative impact related to COVID-19, we can see that young people are the most affected. So we should define a new roadmap for the EU-Africa partnership, taking into account the COVID-19 effects. I would like to ask you two questions. First, urgently, what measures can the EU undertake in order to promote more democracy and less inequality towards youth? And second and last question, the digital revolution has taken a major turn with the COVID-19, investing in capacity building and experience sharing for the African youth is important. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank you for this good opportunity for young people to allow them to take a democratic part in the partnership between Africa and the EU. We are available for more questions.
Question, please. I think, Tanya, that question would be ideal for you.
Yes, perfect. I apologize. I would normally reply in French, but I only heard that. I think the question translated into English, so I'll stick in English. What measures can the EU undertake to ensure more equality for young people? Well, we're lucky in the sense that our Commissioner, Jutta Urpilainen, is focusing a lot on youth. So we are hoping that there will be indeed a new strategy for young people, which will cover an awful lot of the issues that you are referring to. Many of our organisations have been advocating to the Commissioner and to the Commission in general that we need a new children's rights strategy and we need a new strategy for young people. We've never had a strategy concerning inequalities, for example, for the EU's relations with its partner countries. And this is something that we would highly advise. We know that the Commission is definitely increasing its interest in inequalities. We know that the member states are also willing to support this. And what we would like now is to make sure that they actually work on a clear plan of action for where they think they need to be prioritizing. The concern that I have is that sometimes the funding instruments are not entirely aligned with some of the aims that the EU has. And this is something that we are definitely working on within Concord, in the work that we do when we're talking with the European Union, because we think that an awful lot more money needs to go actually to local level organizations. So what we call grassroots organizations. I find that term a little bit pejorative, I must admit, but to organizations in Africa, local small organizations. And this needs to go in the form of much smaller grants. And this is a struggle that we eternally face with the European Union, because of course it has large pots of money that it wants to be able to give to one actor, and that actor then will either invest in a way that benefits others or will sub-grant. It's a heavy, heavy mechanism. And really what we've been arguing for a long time is that much smaller amounts of money need to be going to smaller organizations so that you can actually build movements, for example, if you're looking at building democracy and better governance in a country, or that you can fund startups.
Sure.
So we will keep working on this, and the EU definitely does have young people's interests at heart. The problem is that I don't think that they put their money where their mouth is.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Is there anybody from the panelists who would like to contribute to that question? If not, I would like to ask Anna, would you please go ahead with your question?
Thank you. My question would be directed to Commissioner, and since Ahmed already asked the question about youth, mine would be a bit broader, with a broader scope. So, as I'm representing young European socialists, we want a more stronger and mature Africa-EU relationship, and we expect this relationship to have more engaged and contemporary nature that will be based on the equal partnership, equal relationships when it comes to human development, fair trade, and the respect for human rights and its at its center. That also aims to end the unequal relationship whereby European products are made cheaper in African markets to drive local products out of the business. We want the EU to stop also exporting the weapons to the war zones and instead to play an active role in conflict resolutions, because we think that Union should invest a lot in young people's potentials, especially from Africa, and also to enable them to shape their own future. So my more concrete question will be, in general, how can we shape the way we trade and produce regarding labor rights, regarding environment, also social standards?
Thank you very much, Anna. Your question will be responded through the chat because the Commissioner is not here with us. Thank you very much and have a good morning. I would like to ask Alan here in the studio with me to just give us a brief description of what he does, his platform. And Alan, your floor is yours.
Yes, my name is Alan Hurikiye, and then I'm the founder and CEO of Wagenzi, which is a diaspora investment platform. So for us, what we do to support these African digital transition is that we support startups in Africa, tech startups looking for funding, and then we do it in two ways. So the first way we do is we scout digital startups in emerging countries looking for funding, and then we provide them support. And then when they are ready for investment, we put them on our platform. And then one other thing we are doing also in Burundi, we want to do in Burundi, we want to start next year in Burundi, is to also set up a coding school to provide the opportunity for the youth in Burundi to start using new digital technologies. And then we do that with working with local companies and then with NGOs to try to find digital solutions to current challenges in Burundi. And then once we've done that, then we try to build sustainable companies around those ideas created by the youth in this coding school. And then once we have, let's say, a good business case, then we invite the diaspora from Europe, from the US, then to invest in those startups. And then for us, it's a way, you know, to create decent jobs for the youth, but also to bring new solutions, tech solutions to the continent. So this is what we are trying to do to really promote the digital transformation of Africa.
So how many projects have you sponsored so far?
So we started this year, and then we've been supporting, we started in Uganda, where we're supporting 2 companies right now to develop digital solutions and then connect them to the diaspora so far.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alan. Before I go to our online viewers for the questions, I would like to read out a question we received through the Facebook chat from Karen Kaneza to the Commissioner, and her question was, there's no future without education, especially in young continents such as Africa. Could she tell us what kind of partnership she would envisage with the continent in order to reduce the gap, the digital gap, also about women education? Commissioner sent the response for you, Karen, if you're listening. It says, we need a comprehensive partnership, one that is anchored in the SDGs. We cannot address one issue alone. They are interlinked, and investing in digitalization will help education, which in turn will promote gender equality. Our proposed strategy is built on 5 pillars, which will be complementary and contribute to the sustainable development of our 2 continents. Do we have our next respondent, please?
Would you like me to comment on this as well?
Sorry, Matt, did you want to make a contribution?
I'm happy to comment on this as well.
Okay, you'd like to comment on the question about from Karen. Okay, please go ahead.
Yes. So actually, the vision that I very briefly mentioned before is fully built on the idea of empowering local education developers. And I'm more than certain that there are many, many of those across Africa to come up with their solution to the challenges in education that they see themselves and scale these solutions. So in addition to creating solutions to educational challenges that are relevant for African people, these challenges will be solved in a scalable and sustainable manner, enabling the teams that are building solutions to actually create jobs for themselves as well, and also export these solutions globally to other parts of the world, including Europe. I'm more than confident in this. So we're talking about improving the quality and accessibility of learning, whilst also improving the economic situation with the teams that are working on education across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Is there anybody else from the panelists who would like to contribute to the question, please? Otherwise, I would like to ask Ali Massi from Italy. Are you ready with your question? Let's have your question, please.
Yes, thank you.
Good morning.
I would like to ask. Good morning. I would like to ask Alan if the African Investment Platform has already developed some kind of matching project or program to connect African startups and European ones, European counterparts.
Alan, your question?
If I understand well your question, is it that we support also European startup to connect with African startup? Is it your question?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that, one of the things that we do is what we call business networks. We create business networks around topics, and then we allow those startups in Africa to come to Europe to learn from, so when we're talking about AI, for instance, we are still lacking those knowledge in Africa. So if we have a startup working on AI, we try to connect them with other startups in Europe working on that solution so they can work together. It's a kind of knowledge exchange program.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
To have also the opportunity for European startups to visit how African startups are developing and facing their challenges.
Yes, indeed.
Are you done with your question, Michael?
Yeah, for the moment, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the respondents? Or any comment from the panelists, please?
Yeah, there's
a hand. Okay, Matt?
This topic is super important for me, and that's why we've set up an organization called the Nordic EdTech Forum, because we can see that it's very important for innovators to meet other innovators and to share what they are working on. And the goal for the Nordic EdTech Forum, that is today bringing together around 180 people from the Northern Europe, is to enable friendship between the founders of the innovations. And with the friendship, you can have knowledge sharing between the founders. And on top of this, when people are helping each other, what you will get is the possibility of collaboration and really doing meaningful work together to improve each other's services. I propose to look at it this way, that each country should develop, or region should develop a local association for innovators. And the reason for this is that I see that it's very important for the people to meet physically as well, to build this trust between each other. And then on top of this, we can build this international connections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Anna, did you want to say something? Otherwise, I'm going to just read out another question from Karen. This is for Samson. Samson, are you online?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, here's a question for you from Karen Caneza about the investment in human capital, young people especially. Seeing the discrepancies between the countries in Africa, how would you create such process on a global level? Is this only dependent on political system? What is being done by the private actors?
So I agree. You need a multi-sectoral approach towards, investment in human capital, and the public and the private sector needs to partner to address either the inequality gap or investment in education. One of the things that I see the private sector doing in some Africa is some investment in education. I can't remember the project. It's called Teach One Today, where the private sector is, working with schools, high schools, to recruit teachers and train teachers and deploy them to community schools just to build, the capacities of students. So you need that form of that public, and private partnership. The second dimension to this is during the COVID-19 pandemic, what we saw was the private schools were more disposed, and they easily adapted to e-learning and deploying technology to educate their students, as opposed to the public schools. And that in itself, it's an opportunity, because the private sector, with respect to education, is providing leadership, and government is pretty much playing catch up. And so if the public sector is playing catch up, we need to shift, this pendulum and ensure some equilibrium. So the public schools can also, learn from the private schools and the technologies they are deploying, to facilitate e-learning. The other point about, this investment, and beyond education, it's also, the economic opportunities that it provides. And that is why, after the Africa Free Trade Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's a very laudable initiative that will, foster, not just national, regional integration, but would also help boost the market. Although there are people who don't believe or who don't agree with this view, but AFTA provides an opportunity, to promote regional integration within Africa. And so the AU plays a very critical role, in ensuring, collectivism with respect to accelerating, human development across African countries. And not just AU, but what the regional institutions are doing, like ECOWAS, the SADC region, and then the East African community are doing, would also have an impact on the level of human capital development across those countries. And so my summary is the private sector in Africa needs to work closely with the public sector. And we've seen both from the Ebola pandemic down to the Ebola epidemic down to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen an increased partnership between the public sector and the private sector. And this is what we need moving forward to strengthen that partnership, because yes, governments may not have the money, but government has the power and the legitimacy in some cases to provide an enabling environment, provide a policy environment that would help, the private sector to contribute to human capital development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Todo. Anybody else would like to comment on that question, please? Otherwise, I will read out a question for Tanya. It says, how can Africa and the EU work together to form a basis for technology transfer that can be beneficial to both continents? Tanya, are you online? Okay. Currently, there are many factors. You following the question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Currently, there are many factors limiting this kind of exchange, including cost and intellectual property protection. But there's also significant upside potential for both continents in terms of development for Africa and the opportunity to form a strategic technological partnership that can see Europe as Africa's preferred tech partner going forward. That was the question, Tanya.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I didn't hear what the Commissioner said right at the beginning, but I'm sure she would have been talking about partnership, because partnership is the big theme at the moment for the European Commission, for all its departments under the new President, Ursula von der Leyen. And this includes a digital partnership. And there are just a few things that I would like to inform you about so that you're aware of things that are going on within the EU and to see how then we can build on them going forward. You may know that the EU is writing a strategy for how it can engage better and create a more meaningful partnership with Africa. A part of this strategy is on digital, because digital is one of the 5 or 6 biggest themes at the moment for the Commission. I would say it's probably second in priority. They're working very much on the environment and climate change, and then the second priority is digital. And it's also extremely important in the relations that it wants to create with its partner countries, so with Africa, for example. And I know that they're going to be creating a digital hub, and they are definitely keen to get in touch with a lot of whether it's digital startups, whether it's civil society working on digital, all sorts of technological initiatives that may be happening in Africa. So that's just one conduit, one way of getting engaged, but it is one that I think might have some practical, or I hope would have some practical outcomes. So I would be very happy if you want to contact me by LinkedIn or through email. You can find my email on the Concord Europe website. I'm very happy to sort of try to be a liaison between people to make sure that we can create these partnerships. Because for us, it's extremely important that this does happen. And it goes back to the previous question as well, which I would have liked to have come in on, how European startups can meet with African startups and how we can learn from each other. There's also what we call a policy forum on development, which is a sort of a global conversation among a number of different organizations from different sectors. So it can be from the cooperatives, the fair trade, the private sector, civil society, together with the European Union. And one of its themes coming up is the digital technology transformation. And I'm certainly going to be raising up some of the ideas and the questions that you've been having to see, well, how can we take them forward in a more practical manner? So I absolutely think that the EU is both willing and should be able. The question is whether it's sufficiently flexible and nimble. And I think this is something that we'll need to explore together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Prince, are you satisfied with the response? Oh, sorry, he's okay. Anybody else would like to comment on that?
Yes, it's a guy here from UNESCO. Can I comment?
Sure.
Good, thank you. This question makes me think of a recent needs assessment that UNESCO did about artificial intelligence in African countries and what different government departments, universities, businesses see as artificial intelligence. And I think that what I take away from this needs analysis that we did, which we will be publishing soon, is that it's not just a question of cooperation in tech transfer in the sense of skills or the development. It's also a lot about applications. There are many applications, of course, of artificial intelligence that have a big bearing on relations between Europe and Africa and development in both, such as, for example, in disinformation, various discrimination issues, and so on. But there's another level, which is about regulation and ethics. And of course, everybody knows that Europe has got a particular regulatory position, which is extremely interesting. And I think there's a lot of potential to cooperate in the regulatory level between the EU and its institutions and then the AU and different African countries at the regulatory level. And lastly, I would just signal that the ethical question becomes also a very important dimension of such a cooperation, such partnerships. And here, the African states at UNESCO are very much involved in developing a UNESCO-wide ethical instrument to try and give guidance to governments, businesses, geeks, young people, and so on, who are working in artificial intelligence. So I think it's much broader than just the question of transfer of technology. There are all these other social, rights-based, regulatory issues that should be part of the package. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ahmed, you have another question?
Yeah, can I
please go ahead with your question and just mention who you would like to answer.
Oui, en ce qui me concerne.
Oh, sorry.
La démocratie future, parce que
have a question. I'm thinking of the democracy of our future in the aspect of ethics. I'm thinking of electoral fraud. Democracy will face inevitably those obstacles such as electoral fraud. So the ethical questions will emerge in all our democracies, and I believe we should invest in these questions because at some point in the electoral procedure, a candidate will be confronted with another one. And those ethical questions needs to be examined. Thinking of countries where internet access is less available due to the price of data and the coverage. So these are the reflections I would like to share.
Otherwise, I would like to give all our panelists just a few questions, a few remarks before we conclude our session, please. Matt? Did you want to ask a question, Michael?
Yeah, I would just like
a
to
very
briefly
quick question,
add on-
please, because we're about to. Yeah, sure.
On Tanya. Well, international partnership and the great framework are great, but are not enough. So we need also to build bottom cooperation between Europe and Africa. We started in 2019 a digital platform, Common Future Conversations, with Chatham House and the Robert Bosch Foundation, engaging more than 400 young people in Europe and Africa. But what's the key point? Enhancing and empowering young leader is okay, but we need also to empower and enhance young doers, young thinker, and young citizen. Because otherwise, we will create great framework, but then at the end, the citizen, the people in Europe and Africa, also like outside the bubble of a big city, a big town, and so on, will never be able to take advantage of the opportunities of a strengthened Euro-Africa cooperation.
Okay, Tanya, can you quickly answer that, and then that will be your ending remark as well.
I think that Michelle was probably just adding to the conversation.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So to be very honest, I just simply agree with him. It's absolutely important that we engage an awful lot more with ordinary people. And one of the things that we can do here is through global citizenship education. We are working an awful lot to raise awareness of the importance of, sustainable development, but it can be through all the various different goals. But we need people to be much more aware of the issues, but that can be of the opportunities, but it can also be of the threats. And I think this is one of the things that we need to balance very carefully when we're talking about the digital solutions and digital technologies. We don't want to make people afraid of them, but we do need to be aware. And this is the most important thing. How do we reach ordinary people who don't necessarily already have the internet and these medias? How do we do the best outreach? And there are many different ways that we can do this and that we're working on. And I think some of the speakers already mentioned them. It can be through print, it can be through radio, but most particularly, we need to get people linked up with the internet. And this is how people will be able to talk much more with each other and how citizens will be able to chat with each other. It is quite extraordinary. I'll end on a light note, if I may. But we've heard about many projects that have been run with, for example, intended health benefits, agricultural benefits, energy, whatever it may be. And when research has been done into what people did with these connections to the internet that they were given, where they were supposed to be learning about agriculture, they used their data for leisure purposes very often. They used it because they wanted to connect with people. And I think this is a natural tendency, which is why I support Michel so much in what he's saying. It's a natural tendency that people want to connect with people. And if we can just provide them with that internet access at an affordable price, then I think that these connections will be made.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Can we have the final remarks from Matt and Mr. Berger, please? Very, very quickly, not long remarks. Thank you.
With pleasure. From my side, I fully agree with what Tanya was actually just putting on the table, that super high critical it is to have internet access provided to the people, and good quality access that they can actually use for whatever they need to do. And on top of that, I'm inviting everybody to work together on developing the learning innovation ecosystem in Africa and Europe together. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Yes, Mr. Berger, please.
Yes. Well, I began my presentation speaking about SDG 1610, public access to information, fundamental freedom. public access to information and fundamental freedom. This is something that European and African countries have signed up to. They recognize it's important. Linking those remarks I had and the problem of disinformation to the other part, which is about digital technology. Access to information today is also becoming a question of access to data. And so when we're speaking about the governance of information, we also speak about the governance of data. And that is a growing realm, particularly under this artificial intelligence. And there is a huge need there for African countries and European countries to begin to see to what extent they can harmonize, learn from each other. And the EU has a really important role to play in the governance of data in this cooperation between these two regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan, here in the studio, you have a last remark before we close the session?
Yes, for me, I would like to see how we can really seize this opportunity for digital transformation to create decent jobs, but to create also new products and new services for our continent, for Africa. And then, and then for me, what I would like to see more is, like what would come up with this EU-AU African partnership to see how we can implement concrete solutions to really create, the jobs that Africa needs, but also bring innovation on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you to all our panelists, to all our viewers out there, everybody watching. We'll come back to you at 13:45 with an exclusive interview. But in conclusion, I just want to say that as we all heard, youth are very important in the development of both our continents, especially in Africa. And we need, in our partnership, we need very clear plans and strategies that take into account the local situations. So to end the session, I would like to thank Socialists and Democrats group for organizing this special session on the youth. I'd also like to thank the partners, UNESCO, the Frederick Ebert Foundation, and Young European Socialists. And to everybody there, thank you so much for joining us. Please come back at 13:45 and the discussion continues. Thank you so much.